Hey guys, tonight we're going to the land of cowboys. Imagine you're waking in a wooden cabin deep in the wilderness of 1870s America. Not the Hollywood West. This is the quiet one, the cold one. You open your eyes and everything hurts. Your boots are still on. The fire's gone out. Wind whistles through the cracks in the wall, and outside, the prairie stretches farther than you can see. You sit up slowly. You're not a hero here, not a legend. Just one soul among thousands, trying to last another day. Your fingers ache as they move, stiff from cold, wrapped in cracked leather gloves that never really fit. You bring them to your face, feeling grime and sleep clinging to your skin. The breath you exhale fogs in the morning air, swirling briefly like a ghost before vanishing into the dimness. You reach for the coat at your feet, frozen at the edges where last night's melted snow refroze while you slept. It resists your pull, stiff and crusted, like everything else in this place. You shrug it on anyway, the wool rough against your arms. Shoulders sore from another night on a straw mattress that groans under your weight, but gives nothing in return. Your boots knock against the floorboards as you stand. They echo a little too loud. Empty cabin, empty land, empty morning. The wind creeps through again, touching your neck, reminding you the West doesn't want you comfortable. You listen, somewhere far off, the dry creak of a tree limb. A loose board thumps in the wind. No son, just that sound of nothing, the sound that settles deep into your bones and reminds you that you're far, far from home. You glance around the one-room space. Boredom. A small iron stove, still faintly warm from last night. A tin cup resting on a crate, and in the corner, your rifle, standing upright like a silent companion. You check your boots out of habit. Everyone does here. You shake them, append them. No scorpions today. No mice. Still, you pause before sliding your foot inside, half expecting a bite. You step outside. The light is gray and reluctant. Your breath curls upward, slow and steady. And the first thing you notice is the scent. Not fresh air, not morning dew. It's animal, acrid, old smoke and decay. The unmistakable perfume of people who live too hard and wash too little. Bathing isn't a daily routine out here. It's a luxury, and most save it for special occasions, maybe once a month. You're no different. Water is too precious. When it comes down to drinking or scrubbing off yesterday's dust, survival always wins. The ground crunches underfoot, dry frost breaking beneath your steps. In the distance, your horse stands tethered under the skeletal frame of a weather-warped shed. He stamps and snorts, his breath hanging in thick clouds. You give him a nod, and he shifts, hooves striking stone. He knows the routine. Feed comes next. Always feed, if there's any left. You've rationed what oats you had, so it'll be scrub and twigs. Your hands work slowly, numbly. You pump water from the well, forlong, groaning pulls until the rusted spout coughs a thin stream into the pail. You splash some into your mouth, and it tastes of iron and dirt. You let the rest go into the trough. He drinks greedily. You brush his flank once or twice, just to feel the heat of something living. Then it's back inside, to scrape together whatever breakfast you can manage. Beans. Always beans. Maybe a biscuit gone stale and hard. You chew slowly, not because you want to savor it, but because your jaw is tired, and the warmth from your tin cup seeps into your fingers better than into your gut. You remember something about scurvy, how the gums bleed and the teeth fall out, but you push it aside. You're still young. Strong. Sort of. The coffee? It's barely coffee. Boiled until nearly black. Bitter enough to sting the sides of your tongue. You had a pinch of salt like they taught you. Maybe a crushed eggshell if you're feeling refined. It cuts the bitterness, barely. Still, you drink. You always drink. Caffeine is the only mercy this morning offers. And then the aching begins again. Not a new pain, just the return of the old ones. Lower back, right shoulder, wrists. The workout here never ends. Not really. Yesterday, you chopped wood until your arms went numb. Today, maybe fence mending. Maybe nothing if the wind keeps up. But nothing here is restful. Even stillness is a kind of labor. You pull your coat tighter and glance toward the east. The sun hasn't truly risen, just smeared a faint blush across the horizon, pink like frostbitten skin. You wonder, briefly, if today will be the same as yesterday. It usually is. You think of the others, people nearby, but not close. You haven't seen another soul in 3 days, maybe 4. There's a settlement half a day's ride west, just a few scattered buildings near the trail, but you're not due there until supplies run too low to ignore. You once heard a story about a man who lived 15 years out here without ever seeing another human being. Some say he went mad. Others say he liked it that way. You finish the last of your coffee. The dregs gritty and bitter. And then you start to clean, quietly, slowly, like you're waiting for something, but nothing comes. The wind moves again. Another board creaks. You close the door gently behind you and walk out into the light that isn't quite day yet. Down by the ground softens under your boots as the sun creeps higher, turning frost to mud. What was once a field of white glitter now becomes a gray, sucking weight that clings to your soles with each step. You adjust your scarf, more threadbare than useful, and pull your coat tighter again, even though the wind has shifted. The cold doesn't leave easily out here. It lingers in your bones, in your breath, in the joints of the land itself. You follow the same path you've walked every day since winter began, a narrow trail etched between brittle shrubs and dry, splitting fence posts. They lean like drunkards, tired from standing so long against the wind. Somewhere in the distance, a raven croaks. One sound, sharp and hollow, across 1,000 acres of quiet. You glance up. There he is, perched on a dead tree, feathers puffed, watching you as though he's been waiting all morning. The trail leads to the road, if you can call it that. 2 ruts in the dirt, churned with hoof prints and frozen puddles, stretching off into forever. Town lies to the west. You face east. You're not going to town today. There's nothing there for you yet. No mail, no company, no reason. You turn north, toward the old pasture, the one that barely holds grass anymore. The soil's been stripped bare by seasons of overuse, and even the stubborn prairie weeds are giving up. But there's work to do. There's always work. A section of the fence collapsed during last week's windstorm, and you meant to fix it yesterday. You didn't. You couldn't. Your fingers trace the splinter boards. One is missing entirely, and another dangles by a single rusty nail. You grip it gently. It comes loose with barely a whisper, like even the fence is tired of pretending. You set it aside and reach for the sack of tools you've dragged from the shed this morning. Each nail weighs more than it should. Each hammer blow stirs the echoing silence. Behind you, something rustles. You pause. Not wind, too sharp. You turn slowly, eyes scanning the long yellow grass at the edge of the field. Just a tumbleweed this time. But you remember the stories your neighbor told last autumn about coyotes that didn't act right, eyes that glowed too long, too red. You laugh, maybe, if they hadn't found his dog torn open by something that didn't leave tracks. You go back to work, one plank at a time. Hammer, shift, nail, wipe your brow, breathe, hammer again. The rhythm becomes your shelter. Out here, even repetitive motion feels like purpose. By noon, the fence is standing again, crooked but standing. You step back and admire your work the way someone might admire a worn pair of boots. It isn't beautiful, but it lasts. Your stomach growls. You forgot to eat. Again, you dig into your coat and find a biscuit left over from yesterday. Hard as a brick, slightly damp. You chew slowly, grimacing, but it does the job. Water comes from the nearby creek, filtered through a scarf, and you hope it won't poison you. As you sit by the creek, you notice the moss growing along one rock. A vivid green, almost glowing in the sunlight. It's the only color in the entire landscape. You touch it gently with the back of your finger. It feels soft, almost warm. A living thing, thriving where nothing else does. They say moss was once used to treat wounds, boiled into a tea, pressed into open cuts. You wonder how much of what you've learned out here came from desperation. Most things do. People in the West didn't survive with books or schooling. They survived with guesswork and superstition and luck. The sky has turned pale by the time you finish eating. The wind's quieter now, but that makes it worse. Stillness out here feels unnatural, You walk the length of the fence again, just to be sure. Every post in its place. Every shadow where it should be. But something draws your eye as you pass the edge of the field. A shape half buried in grass. Dark wood, rotting and wet. You kneel down and brush the weeds aside. A box. Or part of one. Weathered. Split down the middle. Maybe an old crate. Maybe something else. There's a name carved into the side, barely visible. Jonas R. You whisper it aloud, and the prairie swallows the sound. You have no idea who that is. You think back to the story told around a fire 2 winters ago, about a traveling family whose wagon broke in a snowstorm near here. No one ever found the wagon. Just the remains of a campfire and a single glove, child-sized, hanging in a tree. You stand and walk away, but the image follows you. By the time you return to the cabin, dusk is already gathering along the low hills. The wind picks up again. It's always waiting. You gather kindling from the pile by the shed, brittle twigs, a few scraps of old fence, some dried dung wrapped in newspaper. You coax the stove to life, feeding it slowly until a flicker of warmth breathes across the floorboards. The orange glow fills the space around you like a memory. You sit by the fire and close your eyes. Just for a minute. Outside, the raven calls again. Once, then silence. The wind presses against the walls like breath. The day is done, but the prairie never sleeps. You wake before the sun rises. The fire has burned down again, and the air bites harder today. You don't move right away. You lie there listening to the creak of the rafters, the dry cough of wind in the chimney, the whistle slipping between the cabin's crooked boards. Beneath it all, a deep silence, one that doesn't hum, doesn't buzz, doesn't pulse with anything artificial, just the slow breath of the land around you. Your eyes open in the dark. You watch the rafters overhead shift from black to gray. You smell smoke, damp wool, old coffee grounds. Your body aches the same way it did yesterday and will again tomorrow. The days don't change much. That's what wears people down. Not the violence, not the hunger, but the sameness. The repetition. The way time folds over itself again and again until it has no shape. Today, you need to make the trip to town. You put off too long. You're out of flour, down to your last twist of tobacco, and one of your boots is splitting at the toe. So you pack light. A small sack, a few coins wrapped in cloth, your old wool coat, a knife tucked beneath your belt, the rifle slung across your back. You check your boots, again just in case. Then you step outside, into the gray blue of early morning. The sky is wide open, stretching out like a canvas no one ever bothered to finish painting. Pinks and grays bleed into one another above the horizon. You tighten the saddle on your horse, fingers stiff, breath visible. He doesn't like the cold either. Neither of you does. But the west doesn't wait for comfort. You ride west into the wind. It carries the scent of distant snow and something sharper, like ash or metal. The land rolls gently around you, dotted with pale grass, leafless trees, and the occasional weather-stripped fence. Somewhere out here, buffalo bones still bleach in the sun, though you rarely see them now. Most were taken, sold, ground down to fertilizer or buttons. Others just disappeared, like the herds themselves. The ride takes hours. Time isn't measured in minutes, but in the shifting shadows and the pressure on your thighs. You pass landmarks you know by feel more than sight. An outcrop of stone shaped like a horn, a rusted wagon wheel half buried in sand, a cottonwood with 3 trunks that looks like a crooked trident. These are your mile markers. No signs, no roads, just memory and instinct. Eventually, the first buildings appear, timid things on the horizon, slouching into the dust like they don't belong. The town looks half forgotten, even when it's full. A cluster of wooden structures spread without order, built wherever the ground allowed. There's no plan, no center, just places people happen to stop. You cross into town with no ceremony. No one looks up. A dog barks once and disappears behind a wagon. You tie your horse near the general store and stretch your legs. The store's porch creaks as you step up. You nod to the shopkeeper through the window. He nods back, not bothering to smile. Inside, the air is warmer but not pleasant. It smells of dust, tobacco, and something sour like old fruit. Shelves line the walls, packed with everything and nothing. Bean pot, dried beans, set, lantern oil, soap shaped like bricks. The prices are written in chalk, but most of them don't matter. Things cost what they cost, and you either pay or you leave without. You trade 3 silver coins for flour, coffee, and a new pair of boot soles. No conversación. Just the sound of coins on wood and a muttered thanks. Before you leave, you ask about mail. The shopkeeper gestures toward a tin box nailed to the wall. One folded envelope inside. Your name, misspelled but close enough. You don't open it. Not yet. Some things need silence. Back outside. The wind has picked up. It moves between the buildings like it's searching for something. Dust curls around your feet. You walk toward the saloon, not for a drink but for news. It's the only place people gather for more than necessity. The saloon is not the place the stories pretend. No palistras. No swinging doors. Just planks and nails and a door that sticks when you pull. Inside, a few men hunch over rough tables. One drinks from a tin cup. Another sharpens a knife, blade whispering against stone. A third leans back, eyes closed, hat pulled low. The barkeep doesn't greet you. He just waits. You nod and ask, "Anything new?" He shrugs. Storm's coming. Someone saw smoke out near Rattlesnake Ridge. Probably trappers. He pauses. Or not. You glance around. Someone has scratched a name into the table by your elbow. Emmy 1871. The letters are faded, worn smooth by time and elbows and beer spills. You wonder who Emmy was. If they ever left. If anyone ever noticed. You nurse a cup of coffee, lukewarm and sharp, then leave. No one stops you. No one watches you go. You visit the blacksmith next, hoping for nails and a look at your rifle. The forge is hot and angry, smoke curling like breath from a beast's mouth. The smith is a broad man, skin pitted from years of sparks. He doesn't speak much, but he's kind in the way fire can be, dangerous but reliable. He tests your rifle, nods, says, "Still straight." You nod back. That's all that needs saying. Before you leave town, you stop at the cemetery. Just a patch of fenced dirt, crooked wooden markers poking from the soil like teeth. Some have names. Most don't. One cross catches your eye. No date. Just a word carved deep. Remember. You don't know who lies there. Maybe no one does. But someone wanted them remembered. There's a story folks don't like to tell. About a man who built the town's first cabin, who vanished one winter night without a trace. No sign of struggle. No tracks in the snow. Just his hat on the step and his boots inside. Some say he walked out into the cold. Others say he never left at all. The townsfolk buried a box in his name anyway. Empty, just to have a place to visit. You leave a small stone on that grave. A habit you learned without knowing why. Some say it anchors the soul. Some say it just shows someone cared. Then you ride home. The sun behind you now, casting long shadows that stretch across the prairie like reaching hands. You watch them grow, shift, vanish. The world dims. The wind turns cold again. Your cabin greets you like a tired friend. Smoke from the stove, curling from the chimney, faint and fragile. You unsaddle the horse, brush his flanks, whisper something kind. He presses his head against your shoulder once before turning to the trough. Inside, the cabin is dark, except for the stove's orange glow. You light a lamp, careful with a match. Oil is low. Everything is always low. You finally open the letter. Just a few lines from a cousin back east. News of it. Dawn breaks with reluctance. Pale light seeps through the gaps in the cabin walls like smoke, slow and cold. You sit still for a moment, wrapped in your coat and your own breath, watching the stove as its last embers surrender to the morning. There's no bird song, only the whisper of wind along the eaves and the sharp creak of wood shifting in the frost. Outside, the sky is a dull pewter, and the horizon swallows the land without ceremony. You step into your boots, stiff, split, and still caked in the dried mud of yesterday's ride, and move toward the door. The latch sticks. You force it open with a grunt. The hinges groan like an old dog warning you not to leave. Today, you're heading back to town. Not for supplies. Not for mail. Just because you need to be around voices that aren't yours. The kind of voices that mutter in corners, argue over nothing, and disappear when the wind rises. Even silence starts to sound dangerous when it's the only company you've kept for too long. Your horse waits, tail twitching at invisible flies, breath blooming in the air like tiny clouds. You saddle him slow, every motion deliberate. Out here, rushing gets you killed. A misstrap, a frayed rein, a loose cinch. Small things have a way of becoming final things. The road into town is unchanged. Ruts, dust, ice. The same crooked tree with a hollow trunk. The same boulder that looks like a crouching man if you catch it from the wrong angle. There's comfort in that sameness, in the way the land refuses to change. You know every inch of this trail, but it still makes your stomach twist when the wind dies and everything falls too quiet. Town is half awake when you arrive. A boy hauls water in a wooden bucket, sloshing it over his boots. A woman sweeps dust from a porch that will be dusty again in an hour. Nothing stays clean here. Nothing stays still. You dismount and tie your horse near the saloon, patting his neck twice before turning away. He knows the routine as well as you do. The saloon doors don't swing. They creak. They stick. You push them open with your shoulder and step inside, the scent of old sweat, sour whiskey, and tobacco wrapping around you like a heavy coat. It's dim, even in daylight, lit only by 2 oil lamps and the gray smear of sun through a cracked window pane. Floorboards groan beneath your boots as you move. The barkeep nods. You nod back. He pours coffee from a dented pot into a tin cup without asking. You sit at a table near the wall and wrap your hand around the cup. It's warm, bitter, and vaguely metallic. Still better than most things. A man at the far table coughs into a rag, folds it carefully, then tucks it into his coat. No one looks at him. You sip your coffee and stare at the grain in the wood, worn smooth by decades of elbows and spilled drink. Someone has carved a date into it. 1849. The year of gold. The year of the lie. They called it a rush, but what they meant was desperation. Thousands came west chasing fortune, and most found only hunger, frostbite, and early graves. Some gave up. Others refused to. A few struck it rich and died before they could spend a coin. There's a woman at the piano today. You didn't see her come in. She's older than most here, with a face like dry leather and hands that move like they're remembering something, not playing. The piano is out of tune, keys missing teeth. The melody she pulls from it is thin and shaky, but it weaves through the room like smoke, curling into corners and around half-empty glasses. No one speaks. That's the power music still holds out here. When words are too hard or too dangerous, sound fills the gap. You close your eyes and listen. The song reminds you of rain on a tin roof, or a lullaby sung too late to a child already lost to sleep, or fever. When the song ends, the silence doesn't return right away. It holds for a beat, then crashes back in with all its usual weight. The barkeep clears his throat. Someone laughs at a joke that wasn't told. A chair scrapes the floor. You step outside again, blinking into the sharp light. Snow has begun to fall, soft. Dry flakes that spin like ash. They coat the boardwalk, the horses, the windows. You brush a few from your shoulder and turn toward the jail. Not because you've done anything. Not yet. But because the sheriff has the only newspapers, and sometimes he talks. The jail is a squat building made of stone, colder inside than out. A stove smokes in the corner, but it's not lit. The sheriff sits behind his desk, reading by lamplight. He doesn't look up. You hear about Abilene, he says after a moment. You shake your head. 3 dead. 1 missing. Wagon train coming down from Kansas. So they got turned around in the storm. He closes the paper. Funny thing is they found tracks that just ended. Middle of the field. No wagon. No bodies. Just the prints. And then nothing. He shrugs like that explains it. Like these stories are normal. Out here they are. You leave the jail and walk down the street past the post office. Closed today. Past the Undertaker's with its plain white shutters. Past the empty storefront that used to be a barber shop until the barber drank himself dry. You pause outside the church. It's one of the few buildings in town built with care. Sturdy frame. Painted walls. A steeple, though the bell's been gone since someone traded it for 6 sacks of flour 2 winters ago. You don't go in. You haven't been inside since the funeral. You can't remember whose it was. A wind gust rattles the shutters as you walk back toward your horse. Snow thickens. The street empties. Even the dogs vanish into corners. The ride back is slower. The wind pushes against you, and the snow stings your face. Your horse is patient but tired. You talk to him under your breath, telling stories from before the cold, before the silence, before the West swallowed the part of you that used to believe in anything. By the time you reach the cabin, the sun is long gone. The fire inside is out. Your hands shake as you strike the match, coaxing a flame into life. You sit by the stove, boots off, fingers raw. The letter you read last night lies folded on the table, unchanged, but something about it feels heavier now. You remember a tale someone told in the saloon once, about a rider who showed up in town during a storm, dressed in black, face covered. He said nothing, just sat, drank one cup of coffee, then left. The next morning, 3 horses were dead in their stalls. No wounds. The cold seeps into your bones before your eyes even open. Not the kind that stings the skin, but the deeper kind, the one that settles into your joints behind your ribs. Inside the spaces between heartbeats. You grope for the blanket, but it's fallen to the floor, half frozen and stiff. The fire is long dead, and the faint gray light leaking through the gaps in the cabin walls tells you it's barely dawn. You don't want to move, but you do, because out here, stillness is a luxury no one can afford. You rise, slowly, each joint popping, spine bending like warped wood. Your breath comes in clouds, brief and fragile. You rub your arms beneath your coat, though the motion warms nothing. The cabin smells of damp ashes, boiled coffee, and the sharp, sour scent of boots left too long by the stove. You move without thinking, each gesture a repetition of every morning before, coaxing the stove to life, blowing on the embers, feeding it with scraps of wood too soft to last more than minutes. Your hands fumble with the matches. One breaks, another sparks, then dies. The third flares just long enough to catch. You kneel there, forehead nearly touching the cold iron, waiting for the heat to find you. It never really does. Breakfast is the same as always, coffee thick with grit, a biscuit so hard you have to soften it with a few drops of water. You chew slowly, jaw aching, while staring at the uneven floorboards, watching frost form at the edges of the walls. When the wind kicks up again, you barely flinch. It's just another voice in a chorus you've memorized. Today, you have to visit the doctor. You're not sick, not exactly, but there's something wrong with your shoulder. Something that hasn't healed right. A tightness, a burn that flares when you lift anything heavier than a skillet. You've ignored it for weeks. That's how most people treat pain out here. You wait out, endure it, hope it doesn't kill you. But this one is different. It wakes you in the night, like a hand reaching into the socket. You've heard too many stories of men who lost limbs because they waited too long. A splinter becomes a fever. A bruise becomes a rot. A cough becomes a coffin. You ride into town without hurry. Every jolt of the saddle reminding you why you're making this trip. The road is slick in places, the snow thawing into slush. The air smells of wet pine and something metallic like rust. The doctor's office is a narrow building between the dry goods store and the livery. You've passed it 100 times, but never had cause to stop. The paint is peeling, and the front window is fogged with age. You tie your horse to the post and step inside. It's colder inside than out. The floorboards creak. The walls are lined with shelves crowded with glass bottles, cloth-wrapped parcels, and instruments that look more like tools for butchering than healing. A pot-belly stove sits cold in the corner. No fire. No comfort. The doctor is a man in his 50s, though the deep grooves in his face make him look older. He wears a heavy vest over a shirt stained at the cuffs, and his spectacles hang low on his nose. He doesn't smile when you enter, just gestures to the chair beside the desk. What's the trouble? You tell him. He doesn't ask many questions, just moves behind you, presses fingers into muscle and bone. His hands are dry and firm, his breath short and wheezing. Could be a tear, he says. Could be the rot. You swallow. The rot? He shrugs. Saw it in a trapper 2 years ago. Started in the shoulder. worked its way to the ribs. By the time he came in, we were cutting to the bone. Didn't matter. What happened? He died. You stare at the floor. But that's not you, he adds, as if trying to reassure. Probably not. More likely, it's inflammation. Joints worn down from use. Maybe infection. You ask if there's anything to be done. He steps to a shelf and pulls down a small bottle filled with cloudy liquid. Laudanum, he says. For pain. You recognize the word. Everyone does. It's opium mixed with alcohol. A few drops numb the worst of it. Too many, and you forget what the pain was for. Too many for too long, and you forget everything. How much? First one's free, he says. After that, 2 bits a bottle. You take it. Not because you want to, but because you're tired of waking in the dark, gasping. He watches you tuck it into your coat and says nothing more. You thank him. He nods. You step back outside, and the light stings your eyes. Town is busy now. Wagons rolling in, boots stamping across porches, children chasing a dog with matted fur and no tail. You watch them for a moment, caught in the rhythm of their laughter, the high sound piercing the cold like birdsong. You stop by the general store to trade for flour. The price is higher this week. It always is. You hand over your coins without complaint and wrap the bag tightly before tying it behind your saddle. As you leave, a poster catches your eye on the bulletin board outside the store. A man's face, sketched in rough charcoal. Wanted, horse thief, $50 reward, alive or dead. No name, just the face. Young, narrow eyes, a scar across the chin. You don't recognize him, but you study the drawing anyway. People have a way of vanishing out here, only to reappear where no one expects them. Sometimes with different names, sometimes not even trying to hide. You remember the story of a woman who came to town 10 years ago. Said her husband went hunting and never returned. She waited 3 years, then left. A year later, someone found a skeleton near the riverbed, boots still on, rifle beside it. No one could say for sure. The jawbone was shattered. The clothes had rotted, but the boots matched her description. The mystery never mattered. By then, she'd remarried, had child. The West doesn't linger on questions. You wake in the middle of the night, heart pounding, unsure if it was a dream or a sound that brought you back. For a moment, the room is all flicker and shadow. The fire's burned low again, casting trembling orange across the cabin walls like something alive. You sit up slowly, listening. The wind moans around the corners of the building, and the roof creaks in protest. But there's something else, something lighter. A thump or a scrape. Your fingers brush the rifle beside the cot, just in case. Silence stretches, long and tense. Then nothing. You lie back down and stare at the ceiling until your eyes blur. You fall asleep with your boots still on. Morning comes without color. Just a pale gray that slips between the boards and nudges you awake with cold fingers. Your shoulder aches. You reach for the bottle the doctor gave you, hesitate, then tuck it back into your coat. Not yet. Today is a traveling day. There's a patch of land about 8 miles north where the fence line needs fixing. It's the kind of task you've learned to dread. Long rides, raw wind, heavy lifting, but also the kind you crave. Because the rhythm of riding, of doing something with your hands, keeps your mind from drifting to places darker than prairie nights. You pack what you need: nails, a hammer, wire, a piece of jerky, a biscuit too hard to chew without soaking. You fill your canteen with water from the creek, filtered through cloth. As always, and step outside. Your horse waits, already saddled, breath rising in plumes. He senses the journey before you do. His eyes flick toward the horizon, wary. He doesn't like going north. Neither do you. The ride is slow. The snow has crusted into a thin shell of ice, and each hoof step cracks through it with a sound that echoes louder than you expect. The world is unnaturally quiet. Trees stand motionless. Not even the crows call this morning. It's as if everything is waiting for something, or holding its breath. About halfway through the ride, you pass a skeleton. Not human. It's a steer, half buried in a drift near a dried-out ravine. You dismount, curiosity drawing you closer. The bones are mostly intact, ribs spread like broken wings. The skull's still crowned with a single horn. The other snapped off clean. Beneath the bones, a torn scrap of cloth. Blue once, now faded to a sickly gray. A neckerchief? A flag? You can't tell. You study the scene. No sign of a brand. No obvious wound. Just absence. Just loss. There's an old story from around here about a rancher who marked his cattle with paint instead of iron. Said he didn't believe in burning the skin. People laughed, said it wouldn't last, that the markings would fade. One spring, his entire herd vanished. No bodies, no prints, just gone. Some blamed rustlers. Others blamed spirits. But none of the cattle ever turned up in the markets. Not even one. You ride on. The fence line appears just where you left it, leaning like tired soldiers, posts cracked and wires snapped where the weight of snow or something heavier dragged it down. You dismount and get to work, setting the hammer rhythmically against the frozen wood. The sound cuts through the air like a heartbeat. You lose yourself in the labor. Swing, lift, twist, nail. The repetition settles your nerves. Here, among wind and wood, your thoughts quiet. You stop watching the trees. You stop checking the sky. The world becomes smaller. Just the post in front of you, the feel of the wire, the shape of your breath in the cold. By midday, you sit to rest. The jerky is hard and stringy. The biscuit breaks a tooth. You drink sparingly, never knowing when the creek might freeze over for good. You lean back against a boulder, one you've sat beside a dozen times before. Its surface is worn smooth, cracked with veins of quartz. There's a lichen growing on the north face, bright green against the gray. You stare at it while chewing, mesmerized by its quiet defiance. Then you notice something strange. At the base of the boulder, scratches. Deep ones. Not natural wear. Not erosion. Straight lines, crossed at odd angles, spaced just so. You brush away snow and dirt. More lines. Carved letters? No, not letters. Symbols. You stare, trying to make sense of them. They look old. Not recent. Not English. You trace one with a gloved finger, and it stirs a cold not made by weather. You've never noticed them before, though you've sat here often. How long have they been here? You stand, suddenly uneasy. The wind picks up as you pack your tools. It howls through the brush with a sound like voices just out of reach. Not words, just tones, moaning, rising, falling. Your horse shifts, ears flat, hooves pawing at the frozen ground. You don't linger. On the way back, you take a longer route, skirting the edge of a wooded bluff where the wind dies and the air smells of pine and old sap. The sun dips low, not yet setting, but casting long shadows across the land. They stretch like fingers. You feel watched, not by animals, by something else. You reach the cabin just as dusk begins to settle. The fire goes quickly, kindling, then logs, then warmth. You peel off your gloves and flex your hands. Your shoulder burns again, but you ignore it. You pour yourself a half cup of water, spike it with 2 drops from the laudanum bottle, and sip it slow. The pain dulls. The silence returns. You think about those carvings. There's an old trapper who used to drink at the saloon every spring. He'd speak of stone signs in the hills. Warnings, he called them. Said they weren't Indian, weren't settler, just old. Too old. He said he found one once near Rattlesnake Ridge, carved into the face of a cliff. He followed the trail above it and found a cave. Inside, bones. Dozens. Not buried. Not scavenged. Just arranged. He never went back. You always figured he was drunk, making up stories to get free whiskey. But now you're not sure. You step outside before sleep, just to clear your head. The moon is high, half veiled by cloud, the snow reflecting silver across the land. The prairie is quiet. Still. Too still. And then movement. Not far. Just at the edge of your vision. The nightmares begin before your eyes close. They're not vivid or strange, just too real. You're back in the saddle, riding across a flat, gray plain that never ends. The wind is howling, and your boots are soaked, and you can't remember where you're going or why. You wake with your jaw clenched, fists curled, breath short. Your heart pounds like you've been running. You stare into the blackness until the walls of the cabin return to you. You rise without ceremony. There's no sense in lying still when the night doesn't want you. You light a lamp and sit by the stove. The fire has gone out again. You don't bother restarting it. The bottle of laudanum is untouched tonight, though your shoulder protests the decision with every movement. You pull your coat tight around you, open the notebook on the table, and stare at the blank page. You mean to write something? You're not sure what. Notes? A list? A confession? Instead, you close the book and look out the window. The stars are bright tonight. The kind of bright that makes you feel smaller than usual. The kind that reminds you of how much of this world doesn't care whether you live or die. You think about the trail. The one that cuts westward toward Oregon, long abandoned now, except by ghosts and fools. You've seen the traces. Wagon ruts turned to shallow scars in the earth. Bits of iron, a shoe buckle, a broken wheel, graves with no names, marked by stones or tilted crosses or nothing at all. People used to come this way by the hundreds, by the thousands, seeking land or freedom or with just the chance to begin again. You've walked parts of the trail yourself, not the full length, but enough to feel the pull of it. Wide skies, endless road, the ghost of old wagons creaking in your ears. They say 1 in 10 died on the Oregon Trail, sometimes more. Disease, starvation, accidents. Some just vanished, lost to rivers, to snow, to silence. You remember finding a skeleton once? Years ago, half buried in a dry gulch. The bones were picked clean, but the boots were still laced. A tin cup beside them, a rusted knife. No hotstone. You'd buried them with your own hands, under a cairn of river stones. Not because you knew them, just because no one else would. This morning, you pack light. You're heading west, tracing the old trail for the first time in months. Not for long, just far enough to feel the rhythm of it again. Just far enough to chase a ghost or two. The horse moves slower today, and you don't blame him. The wind is sharp. The clouds overhead stretch like bruises across the sky, long and low and heavy. You pass the same bent tree you always pass, and the rock that looks like a sleeping dog, and then the land flattens. Opens. Here, the trail is barely visible. Just twin lines like a memory, like a scar. You ride until the wind forces you to dismount, then walk beside your horse with the reins in one hand, your coat flapping behind you. The silence here is different. It's not the usual prairie quiet. It's older, heavier. You think of all the people who walked this road before you. Children riding in wagons, mothers with babes on their backs, men with rifles and dreams. You wonder how many of them made it. How many lie beneath your feet? You pause at a ridge and look out over the basin. A dusting of snow clings to the hills. In the valley below, you could just make out a circle of stones, too even to be natural. A fire pit, maybe, or a grave. You ride down. The stones are cold and weathered. Moss clings to the northern side of each. Inside the circle, nothing but wind-blown dirt and dry grass. You kneel. Press your hand to the ground. It's soft, freshly disturbed. No, just snow melt. You sit for a moment, breathing slowly, listening. Then you notice something half buried near the edge of the ring. A small, round object. You dig with your fingers until it comes free. A button. Oh, maybe old. Hand-carved. You turn in your hand, feel the smoothness, the faint ridges where fingers once polished it through use. A child's coat? A soldier's uniform? You'll never know. You place it in your coat pocket and stand. A shadow moves at the ridge. You freeze. Your hand goes to the rifle on your back, but you don't draw it. Instead, you squint, heart pounding. Nothing. Just wind. Just snow. But you don't ride on. Not yet. You build a fire. It takes time, kindling dry grass, careful breath, but soon a small flame dances among the stones. You warm your hands above it and eat the piece of jerky you packed. The heat isn't much, but it's something. You close your eyes and try to imagine what it must have felt like to camp here 100 years ago. 200. No roads. No towns. Just the hope of reaching a place you couldn't even imagine. You leave the fire burning when you go. Not out of carelessness. Out of reverence. Someone else might need it. You take a different trail home, following a line of shallow ravines. Your horse picks his way carefully over the frost-hardened ground. The sun dips lower. The shadows stretch. You pass a cairn you've seen before. No name. Just stones. You pause. There's a stick poking from the top of the pile. Fresh. Someone's been here. You dismount and approach slowly. At the base of the stones, tucked in the shelter of a flat rock, a small doll. Wooden. Simple. Worn smooth by time. You stare at it, chest tight. Someone left it. Recently. You pick it up. Cradled in your hand. It's lighter than you expect. You can't bring yourself to take it. You place it back where you found it, then turn and ride. By the time you reach your cabin, night has fallen. The stars are sharper than glass. The moon sits low and swollen. You unsaddle the horse. Brush him down in silence. His breath fogs the air. Inside, the cabin is cold. You start the fire, light the lamp, sit at the table. You pour yourself a cup of water and stare at the page you never wrote on last night. This time, you write one word. Remains. Then you put the pencil down and go to bed. The image of that small wooden doll burned into your thoughts like a brand. In your dream, someone walks beside you on the trail. But when you turn, there's no one there. Just the wind, and the road, and the sound of footsteps that don't belong to you. The morning sun brings no warmth, only light. You wake to its pale reach creeping across the cabin floorboards. Brushing against the heap of clothes by your bed, the rifle leaned in its usual corner. The cup still half full from the night before. You sit up slowly, groaning as your shoulder pulls tight, then looser. The ache has dulled to something familiar now. Part of your routine, like coffee and silence. Today, the wind carries new smells. Smoke, meat, a sweetness you can't quite name. It's coming from the southeast, the old trail that loops near the foothills, where the soil grows richer and trees gather in small, quiet groves. You haven't been that way in months. Not since before the first snow, when the paths were still dry and soft beneath your boots. You remember wild onions growing near the water, their scent rising when crushed beneath a horse's hoof. The memory feels distant, like something from a dream someone else had. You decide to ride that way today. No reason, just the pull of something different. The need for movement that isn't work. For observation that isn't repair or defense. You pack lightly, rifle, knife, jerky, water. No tools. No needs. You saddle the horse, who doesn't complain, but doesn't seem eager either, and begin the slow climb out of your usual routes and into the low hills. As you ride, the world begins to change. The grass becomes thicker, greener. The snow patches more scattered, melting in the sun's reach. Bird song returns. Not much, but enough to make the silence feel less absolute. You pass a stream, narrow and fast, its water clear enough to see pebbles dancing beneath. You stop to let the horse drink, then kneel and splash your face, the shock of cold making you gasp and laugh. Your first sound all day. Farther ahead, smoke curls between the trees. Not fire smoke. Cook fire smoke. You slow the horse and listen. Voices. Not English. Soft, fluid, rising and falling like a song. You dismount and lead the horse the rest of the way. Boots muffled in the thick brush. Then, through the trees, you see them. A small camp, maybe 6 or 7 people gathered around a low fire. Cast iron pots, rough tents, a horse tethered nearby. The group is mixed in age, 2 older men, 1 young woman, 3 children, and a boy of perhaps 15 tending the fire with a stick. Their clothes are well worn but clean, their eyes sharp. You recognize the signs. Travelers, likely Mexican, maybe mestizo, passing through from the south. Traders, possibly, or families pushed west by land grants denied or lost. You step into view slowly, deliberately. The boy sees you first and stands tense. One of the older men looks up, says something softly in Spanish. The others turn. You raise a hand, not a wave, just a gesture of peace. The man approaches. He's tall, lean, with deep-set eyes and a broad, weathered face. His mustache droops like the feathers of an old hawk. His hands are empty, but not careless. He speaks in Spanish first, then tries English. You ride far? You nod. From the valley. Cold there. You shrug. Always. He studies you for a moment, then nods toward the fire. You eat. You hesitate, then nod again. He waves you forward, and soon you're sitting on a rolled blanket near the flames. The children eye you with curiosity. The woman offers you a bowl, stew of some kind, thick with beans and something tougher, meat with a gamey smell. You accept it gratefully and eat in silence. No one asks your name. No one offers theirs. But that's not uncommon out here. Names are not always useful. Deeds speak louder. Presence is enough. After a time, the old man points to the edge of the camp, where a small crate rests beneath a canvas. He lifts the cloth, revealing several carved figures, small wooden horses, birds, and dolls, each smoothed by hand, painted in muted colors. Trade? He says. You consider. Pull your coat tighter, then dig into the inner pocket. You offer a half roll of tobacco, wrapped in oilskin. His eyes crinkle. See, he selects a figure, a small horse with a broken ear, and hands it to you. The trade is done. You run your thumb over the wood, feeling the lines of grain, the groove where a knife shaped the neck. One of the children points at your rifle and says something in Spanish you don't understand. The boy laughs. The woman shakes her head. The old man simply says, "Guns always bring stories." You nod. They begin packing soon after. The children work without complaint, the adults without words. You help gather firewood into a pile, then step back as they douse the coals. Smoke rises once more, trailing into the trees like a memory. Before they leave, the old man touches your shoulder lightly. "North," he says, "bad snow soon." You nod again. They vanish like ghosts, quiet, deliberate, certain. You watch until the last of them disappears between the trees, then mount your horse and ride. The wind shifts. You take a longer path home, through a glade you've never noticed before. In the center stands a dead tree, limbs blackened, bark stripped. At its base lies a small circle of stones. Another grave, no marquer, except for a coin, placed upright on a stick, gleaming in the slant of sunlight. You dismount and examine it. Not American. Spanish maybe, old, weathered by decades. You leave it untouched. Some offerings aren't meant to be disturbed. You think of the carved horse in your coat pocket, of the nameless traders, of the child who watched you with ancient eyes. You wonder how long they've been walking these trails, and how many before them did the same. History here doesn't stay in books. It rides on backs. It speaks through smoke. It sleeps beneath trees. As you return to the valley, you pass a line of stones half buried in moss. Another grave, or maybe a trail marker. A coyote watches you from the ridge. Doesn't run, just watches. Back at the cabin, the light is fading. You unsaddle the horse, feed him what little oats remain, and light the stove. The figure sits. The morning is quieter than usual. Not because the wind has stilled. It hasn't. It moves through the trees and across the frostbitten grass like it always does, humming in the same mournful tones. But something is missing. You can't say what. It's like a string has been cut from the great loom of the land. You feel it in your teeth, in a way your breath curls too slowly, in the hollow between one footfall and the next. You sip your coffee in silence, wrapped in a coat that's grown thinner than the shadows in the corners. The carved horse sits on the table in front of you, next to the Spanish coin, both catching the early light like they're watching each other. You glance at the doll's gouged eye, the frayed paint. You think of the trader's children, their silent labor, their long walk towards somewhere unknown. The stove is warm, but the rest of the room isn't. You let the last of the firewood burn low. You'll need to gather more today. But first, something else. There's a homestead a few miles south, past the narrow bluff with the split tree. You've passed it before, even traded eggs once. Long ago, a woman lives there. Alone, far as you know. They say her husband died 3 winters back, froze on the trail, trying to return with flour and nails. She buried him herself, dug the grave with a spade and her bare hands when the shovel broke. No priest, no prayers, just earth and grit and the silent scream of snow falling through pine. You meant to check in on her before. You never did. But today you do. You saddle the horse with your usual care. The bridle creaks, the reins stiff with frost. He snorts once, ears twitching, as if sensing your destination. You pat his flank and mount. The trail south is narrow, pinched between ravines and thick brush. Tracks are hard to see. You ride slowly. The sun cuts through the clouds in pale streaks, falling across the hills like spilled milk. You pass a fox, red and thin, who watches from a rock without flinching. It doesn't move, even as your horse clops past. You nod at it anyway. Near midday, you reach the bluff. The tree at the top is dead, split into a jagged Y by lightning years ago. Crows nest in a hollow now. One takes flight as you pass beneath, its wings slicing the air like a blade. Her cabin appears ahead, not much larger than yours. Smoke trails from the chimney, thin and straight. A good sign. You dismount, leading the horse to the hitching post. He paws at the earth. You whisper to calm him. You knock twice. There's a pause. Then the door opens. She stands in the frame, coat wrapped around her shoulders, a shotgun loose in one hand. She's older than you, maybe by a decade. Her face is lined but strong, and her eyes are the kind that don't ask questions unless they have to. She studies you for a long moment, then nods once and steps aside. Inside, the cabin is neater than yours. 2 chairs, 1 bed, a table scrubbed to a dull shine. Herbs hanging from the rafters, bundled tight and drying slowly. A cat sits in the corner, watching. You nod at it too. You sit when she gestures. She offers coffee. You accept. No words pass for a long time. Just the scrape of tin cups, the crackle of wood in the stove. Finally, she speaks. Haven't seen you since fall. You nod. Been writing. Repairs. Fence work. She raises an eyebrow. Fence don't go south. No. Another pause. Shoulders stiff, you say. Saw the doctor. Still breathing then. Barely. She smiles, just barely. That's how it goes. You sip the coffee. It's stronger than yours. Hotter, too. It helps. She doesn't ask why you came. That's kindness out here. You talk about small things instead. How the last storm knocked down a pine near your creek. How you saw a hawk take a rabbit at dawn. How the coyotes sound closer now. She nods through it all, sometimes adding a note. Her voice is low, even, unhurried. You learn things you never knew. That she brews her own vinegar from apples she dries in summer. That she stitches her own boots from rawhide. That she once shot a wolf that tried to dig into her root cellar. You admire the rifle hanging over her hearth. Muzzleloader, you ask. Springfield, she says, was my brother's. Fought with it in '63. Shiloh, you nod. He make it back. She shakes her head. Send me the gun. She doesn't cry when she says it. After a while, you offer to check her roof. She hesitates, then agrees. You climb the ladder while she steadies it, handing you nails and a strip of canvas. The wind howls once while you work, and the shingles flap like broken wings. You patch the gap, hammer slow and steady. When you come down, she thanks you with a single nod. You share a quiet lunch, salt pork, boiled potatoes, flatbread. Simple. She eats with small bites, careful movements. You match her pace. There's something ceremonial about it, though no one says grace. You stay until the sun touches the ridge. When you finally rise, she walks you to the door. Next snow'll be heavy, she says. I know. Come spring, we'll need a new fence. You nod. She looks at you for a long time, then says, Don't wait so long next time. I won't. You ride home in silence. The wind has picked up, carrying scents of sage and pine and something older. The sky above you burns orange, then pink, then purple. Shadows stretch across the prairie like fingers reaching backward in time. You pass a stone marker on the trail, one you've never noticed before. A boot print beside it. Smaller than yours. Recent, but no other tracks. You don't stop. At the cabin, darkness has already gathered. You light the lamp, sit at the table, and take the wooden horse from your pocket. You place it beside the coin, then add something else, a scrap of cloth from your coat, torn on a nail at her place. A token, a sign that something passed through you today, something you want to remember. You don't plan on going back to town today, but that's how these days go, planned in stillness, undone in motion. The storm hits before sunrise. Not with snow or thunder, but with a cold so sharp it feels like teeth on your skin. The fire refuses to catch. The stove spits sparks, then sulks into silence. And the cabin itself groans with the pressure of wind, pushing from all sides. When you lean your hand against the door, it pulses like a drum beneath your palm, a warning in wood. You layer up. Thick shirt, heavier coat, scarf wound twice around your throat. You debate bringing the rifle. Then bring anyway. Out here, you learn not to ignore instincts. They're older than logic. Smarter. You've barely stepped outside when you see it, a black smear in the white just down the trail. Your boots sink through crusted snow as you move toward it, heart suddenly loud in your ears. It's a body. Face down. No coat. No hat. One boot missing. You drop to your knees, fingers already numb as you check for breath. Nothing. Skin stiff. Eyes frozen open. Young, barely older than a boy. Maybe 20. Pale hair, clinging to his cheek like wet straw. A stranger. You scan the trail behind him. One set of tracks. No blood. No signs of a struggle. Just a trail that starts nowhere, appears suddenly in the middle of the ridge, and ends here at this broken body. You've seen death before. Up close. Slow and quick. Bloody and clean. But something about this one makes the hair on your arms rise. You stand quickly and look toward town. The wind howls harder, carrying grit and snow and questions. You tie the body across your saddle. He's lighter than he should be, like something already halfway gone. Town isn't far, but the ride feels endless. Snow whips your face, freezes your lashes. The horse resists, step by step. The wind seems to push back harder with every mile. But eventually, the buildings appear, gray shapes leaning into the storm. People gather as you ride into the square. No one speaks at first, just eyes watching from under scarves and wide-brimmed hats. You stop outside the jail and call out. The sheriff appears, pulling on his coat as he steps into the cold. His face sits hard when he sees the body. Where? He asks. You tell him. Anyone with him? No. He squints at the trail behind you, eyes scanning the snow like it might lie. You help him carry the boy inside. The jail is warmer. Barely. A stove in the corner rattles with weak flame. The sheriff lays the body on the desk and begins checking the pockets. You watch in silence. A matchbook. Empty. A broken comb. A photograph. Small, curled. A woman. Smiling just barely. No name. The sheriff exhales, long and low. Don't know him. You ask about missing travelers. He shakes his head. Too many come through. Some don't make it. Some don't want to be known. You nod. He turns the body gently and pauses. On the back of the neck, 3 small marks. Perfectly round. Aligned like Orion's belt. Not bruises. Not bites. You reach forward, but the sheriff stops you. You didn't touch that? He asks. Only to carry him. He nods, slowly, then covers the boy with a sheet. There's stories, he says. You don't reply. You don't need to. He pours 2 mugs of coffee. Offers you one. You sip in silence. It's bitter but hot. He speaks again, voice low. You remember the traveler who came through last spring? The one with the lisp? You nod. He'd been odd, soft-spoken, always looking over his shoulder. He left behind a map, the sheriff says. Wouldn't say where he was headed, but it marked a spot, north of the old ridge. No trail, no reason. Just a red X. I never thought much of it. But lately, he trails off. You finish your coffee and stand. You wanted to check it? No, he says too quickly, then softens. Not alone. You nod and step outside. The storm has quieted some. Less howl, more whisper. You stop by the general store before heading back. Pick up nails, flour, lamp oil. Inside, the clerk eyes you with a glance too long, then busies himself with the till. You heard? He asks. About the boy? He nods. Not the first this season. Man came through 2 weeks back, staggered into the saloon, bloody hands, frostbitten toes. Said he found bones. Clean. Stripped. Still warm. Where? Didn't say. Just kept whispering one word. What? The clerk swallows. Woke in. You leave without replying. The trail home is slower. The snow has thickened, and your horse struggles through drifts. You dismount and walk beside him, hand steady on the reins. The world is white and quiet and watching. At the cabin, you light the stove, place the supplies on the shelf, and sit. You remember a tale you heard once, told in low tones over whiskey and dark, about a man who lived alone near the ridge. People said he never aged, that he wore gloves even in summer, that his shadow bent the wrong way at sunset. One spring, 3 children went missing. A search party rode out. They never found the kids, but they found the man's cabin. Empty. Inside, only a mirror, cracked and black. No reflection. The sheriff at the time burned the place to the ground. But some nights you can still see the light from the ridge. You pour a small measure of laudanum into a tin cup and sit beside the window, watching snow gather on the sill. You hold the wooden horse in your hand and turn it slowly. The coin gleams beside it. You think of the woman in the cabin to the south. Her steady hands, her eyes that had seen more than they ever said. The wind rises again. You close your eyes and listen. Not for danger, not for ghosts, but for memory. Because out here, memory is all that keeps the past from repeating. The wind does not rest. It moans through the chinks in the wall long after midnight, peeling sleep from your mind like bark from an old tree. When you open your eyes, it's still dark. One of those late winter dawns where the blackness refuses to lift and the cold presses so close it feels like another body beside you in the bed. You rise slowly, the joints in your knees crackling like dry pine. The air in the cabin tastes stale, smoke, dust, oil from the rifle. The laudanum bottle remains unopened on the table, its cork still sealed tight. You've managed without it again. But every morning, you wonder how long that will last. You stir the fire with a poker. Embers pulse like a heartbeat in ash. You feed them with kindling, then with a log. The room glows orange and low. You warm your hands, then brew coffee with the last of the grounds. Thin, bitter, the kind that keeps you upright, if not awake. Outside, the sun has barely begun its climb. Just a blue smear in the east, bruised and reluctant. You decide to go to the hills today, not the soft hills to the south where the woman lives. Not the low ridges marked with graves and wagon tracks. The northern ones, the sharp hills, rust-colored and grim. That's where the mines used to be. You've been avoiding them for years. The gold rush didn't touch this area hard, not like California. But enough veins were found in the 1860s to send waves of hungry men scrambling into the hills with picks and dreams. They built shacks, dug holes, named creeks after women they loved or hated. Then they died, some in collapses, some in fights, some just vanished, swallowed by the dark. The mines are mostly empty now, caved in, picked over, ghosts left behind. But yesterday, while splitting firewood, you found something strange wedged between the logs. A coin, not American, not Spanish. Copper, smooth, worn thin, with a symbol that made your skin tighten. 3 circles in a triangle, like the marks on the boy's neck. You held a long time before pocketing it. Now you ride with it tucked close to your chest. The trail to the mines is rough. Ice clings to the rocks, and your horse slips twice before you dismount and walk. The wind is fierce here, funneled through the stone in long, cold sighs. The trees are fewer, stunted, the land harsher. It feels like climbing into the ribs of a dead animal. At the ridge's edge, you find a first opening, a mouth cut into the earth, dark and crumbling. Timber frames long rotted. A rusted cart overturned near the entrance, its wheels half buried in frost. You tie your horse to a tree and approach. The mine breathes cold. You light a lantern. Inside, the walls close fast. The air smells of iron, mold, and something deeper. Not decay, not death, just depth. You move carefully, feet echoing on stone. The corridor splits twice. You choose the left. It narrows, then opens into a chamber. Empty, just broken beams, rocks, and puddles. You turn to leave, but something glints on the ground, half buried in silt. A tooth. You kneel. It's human. Yellowed. Chipped. You scan the space again, suddenly aware of how quiet it is. Not even your breath sounds right. The shadows feel thicker. You retreat slowly, lantern high. Back outside, the world feels sharper. You breathe hard, try to push the mine's air from your lungs. Your horse watches you with wide eyes. You untie him, climb into the saddle, and turn toward the ridge's far side. There's another shaft there, older, less known. You find it hidden behind a tumble of rock and brush, almost invisible unless you're looking. The entrance is narrow, but the beams are intact. You tie the horse again and light your lantern once more. This mine feels different. The air is colder, the silence denser. The walls are smooth, not dug by picks but melted, as if shaped by heat or time. You walk slowly, and the floor slopes downward. You pass old tools, rusted shovels, a torn satchel, a cracked helmet. Then you see it, a circle of stones in the tunnel floor, carefully placed. Inside, the bones of a bird, arranged in a spiral, deliberate. You kneel, touch one. It crumbles instantly. You stand again. A draft pushes against your back. The flame in the lantern flickers. You hear a sound, a single breath, not your own. You turn fast, hard in your throat. Nothing. The tunnel is empty. You back away, step by step. Turn, walk, faster. The flame shivers. The air grows tight. You emerge gasping, blinking into sunlight like a man surfacing from water. You don't look back. The ride home is slow. Your horse trembles under you. You say nothing. Think nothing. Just move. At the cabin, you unbuckle the saddle with shaking hands. You sit at the table, remove the coin from your pocket, and place it beside the others. The symbol stares back. 3 circles. Triangle. The same. You make coffee. Not because you want it. Because you need something normal. Then you remember a tale you heard once, whispered by a dying man in the back of the saloon, drunk and half frozen. He said there were people who lived in the mines. Not miners. Not thieves. Others. Older than this land. They carved symbols into the stone, worshipped silence, and spoke only in dreams. He said if you heard them breathe, it was already too late. You didn't believe him. Until now. The sky darkens. You light the lamp early. The rifle stays across your knees. And still, you feel it, that cold draft behind your shoulder, like something that followed you home. The rifle stays close all night, propped against your chair, your hand resting on the stock, even as your eyes drift and the fire sinks low. Sleep comes only in pieces, fragments of breath, slivers of sound. You hear the wind outside, but it doesn't sound like wind. It has rhythm, a staggered pace, like someone limping across a frozen porch, like boots scraping over dry snow. When you finally drift under, the dreams come thick and muddled. You see the mine tunnel again, longer this time, lined with candles that never burn down. You walk and walk, deeper and deeper, until you reach a chamber shaped like a rib cage, with walls that pulse like breath. There are figures there, shadow thin, featureless, hunched in circles, whispering in tongues that make your teeth ache. You try to speak, but your mouth is full of dirt. You wake with a shout. The cabin is still dark. Embers glow in the stove, faint and flickering. Your coffee tin sits by your feet, cold and untouched. You rub your face, trying to shake off the dream, but it clings to you, lingers behind your eyes like ash on glass. Outside, the snow has hardened again. You move through it with caution, boots crunching through the crust. Your horse lifts his head as you approach, ears back, tail twitching. He doesn't relax until you speak his name, soft, steady. You brush his flank. Check the water trough. Still frozen. Today, you ride east. There's a cattle drive trail there, mostly abandoned now. Once, it ran from the southern ranchlands all the way up to the rail lines. You followed it before in warmer months. Today, you ride it again, not for work but for distance. To put miles between you and the mine. To feel the sun, even pale and weak, on your back. The trail is wide and scarred. Deep ruts in the earth, carved years ago by hooves and wagon wheels, still linger beneath the frost. You pass skeletal trees and barbed wire half buried in snow. Bits of old fencing lean like tired bones. A single boot hangs from a post, shriveled, toe pointing west. The wind is sharp but less cruel than yesterday. You ride until the sun is directly above you, then dismount to rest near a dry creek bed. The horse drinks from the canteen without complaint. You chew a strip of jerky, your jaw moving without hunger. You remember reading once, long ago, maybe in a tattered almanac, that stampedes killed more men than duels ever did. 1,000 cattle running blind in the dark, spooked by thunder or a match strike or the flick of a blanket, could flatten everything in their path. There are stories of cowboys who vanished beneath the hooves, never found, never remembered. Just blood on the dust and an empty saddle. They say you can still hear the hooves in some places. If you camp near the trail, ghost herds moving in silence, stampeding through history. You ride on. Farther east, the land changes. The ground softens, rises in gentle hills. The snow fades in patches, revealing scrub grass and twisted mesquite. You spot the remains of a chuck wagon, just a frame and wheels now, silvered with rot. A Dutch oven rests beside it, half sunk in the soil. You dismount again, drawn by curiosity. Inside the wagon shell, someone scratched words into the wood. We followed the wrong star. You trace them with a glove. The letters shallow but certain. Nearby, half buried in a drift, you find bones. Not animal. You kneel. There's no skull, just ribs twisted like driftwood and a hand. The fingers are curled, nails black with time. A ring still clings to the middle one. Plain brass, worn smooth. No niches. No dates. You don't dig further. Instead, you build a small cairn with the surrounding stones. Just enough to keep scavengers off. Just enough to make it known. Someone passed here. Someone mattered. By the time you remount, the sun is tilting west. You urge your horse to trot, following the trail home. The wind shifts again, colder now, tinged with smoke. Not firewood, not pine, brush fire maybe, or something burning where it shouldn't be. The scent fades before you can find the source. You reach the cabin by dusk. You unsaddle the horse, brush him down, feed him oats soaked in hot water. He nudges your chest afterward, a rare sign of gratitude. You nod once and head inside. The stove takes longer to light. You strike 3 matches before the flame holds. You sit beside it, letting the heat push into your legs. Arms, face. Slowly, the cold leaves your fingers. You retrieve your notebook. This time, you write. Something's wrong in the hills. The old mines aren't empty. Found signs, bones, carvings. A coin like the boy had. Not alone out here. You pause. Then add. Dreams are heavier. Waking feels thinner. You close the book, tuck it beneath your cot. You remember another story, told by a trader once. A man with a withered leg who walked with a stick carved from antler. He said he rode with a drive crew that vanished on the second night. Said he woke to silence and saw only hoof prints circling his camp. No catel, no men, just himself and one lantern left burning. He never found the herd, never found a body, just kept walking west. He ended up in your town, sold his saddle for whiskey, and died 2 winters later. His journal, if he kept one, was never found. You glance toward your own pages. Wonder who might read them one day, and whether they'll believe a word of it. The frost has returned with teeth. It came in the night, biting through the seams of the cabin and creeping down the rafters like a slow, invisible leak. Your breath rises in clouds before your face as you lie still, cocooned in wool and silence. Even beneath the blanket, your toes sting. The fire went out again hours ago, the coals gray and faint, like a memory too tired to keep burning. You blink toward the ceiling and think, for just a moment, that you see movement in the shadows, an echo of the dream you were pulled from. But when you sit up, there's nothing. Just wood. Just chill. Just another morning that might as well be the same as the one before it. You light the stove by instinct now, hands numb but practiced. The match breaks. The second catches. You crouch there until the flame settles into rhythm, watching the orange glow pull shadows toward it. You pour water into the tin kettle. You slice off a piece of dry cornbread. You chew while you stare at the floor. Today you have to go to the fields. You put it off for a week, maybe 2. The ground is too hard to plant, too dead to hope. But you still need to check the fencing, clear the brush, and mark the corner posts before snow returns in force. You've done it every year, even knowing that nothing grows until April. It's the ritual. It keeps your hands busy and your mind from slipping too far into the parts of itself you try not to visit. You layer up, coat, scarf, gloves, and grab the canvas sack with your tools. Outside, the sky is cloudless and pale, stretched too thin across the horizon. The sun is bright, but without heat. The air smells of wood smoke and distance. The field is a half-mile east of the cabin, beyond the tree line where the land flattens and the brush begins to turn gold in winter. You walk there slowly, boots crunching over patches of brittle ice, shoulders hunched. Your breath makes small ghosts in the air. The field itself looks like a frozen sea, ridges of dead furrows, bits of last season's stalks sticking up like bones. You pause at the edge, staring across the land that never quite gives enough. You once believed it would. The first year, you dug furrows by hand, turned earth like it would reward you for effort alone. Then the heat came, then the locusts, then the early frost. Now you know better. You begin at the southern corner, inspecting the fence line. A section has collapsed where a deer must have jumped wrong, or perhaps where snow piled and bent it flat. You kneel and begin to repair it, each nail a slow conversation with the wood. The hammer's rhythm is the only music out here. You swing, you breathe, you don't think. The wind rises again, cold and sharp. It carries with it the sound of insects. Not now, not here. You stop hammering, heart knocking in your chest. You listen. Then you hear it again, like wings, a whir, too high-pitched for birds. And then they come. From the south. A small cloud of dark specks. You squint against the sun. At first, you think it's dust or ash. But as it draws closer, you see the shape. Thin bodies, fast wings. Swarming low over the grass like they're searching for something. Grasshoppers. Not many. Maybe 2 dozen. But enough to make your skin crawl. You drop the hammer and step back, watching them scatter across the brittle stalks, pausing, leaping again. You haven't seen any since late summer, and never this late in the year. You remember stories, tales your grandfather told of the great swarm of 74. They came without warning, darkening the sky. Ate crops, wood, leather, cloth. They even chewed the wool off sheep. He said, nothing was safe. People tied their curtains down, slept with wet cloth over their faces. There are photos, you've heard, images of houses buried waist-deep in wings. That species, the Rocky Mountain locust, was declared extinct decades ago. They vanished. No one knows how or why. One year they were a plague. A few years later, gone. Not a single confirmed sighting since 1902. But still, sometimes people whisper. You shake your head, rub your face with a gloved hand, and gather your tools. The grasshoppers vanish into the scrub. No trace, no sound. You fix the last post and start to leave, but something catches your eye. A pattern in the soil. You kneel, brush the frost aside. Carvings, lines, circles, a spiral. Similar to what you saw in the mine, but older. Faint, worn down by years of sun and hoof and shovel. You touch it gently. The soil is loose beneath, too loose for winter. Like it was dug recently and only barely tamped down. You don't dig further. You walk home faster than usual, watching the horizon the whole time. At the cabin, you light the fire high and sit close, watching the flame and not much else. Later, you write again. The insects are back. Out of season. Wrong time. Wrong number. The symbols are repeating, on rocks, on soil, on skin. Nothing here is random. I think the land remembers. I think it's trying to show me. You pause. There are graves I never marked. You think of the boy you brought into town. You think of the tooth in the mine. You think of the doll by the trail, its arms outstretched toward no one. The kettle whistles. You pour water over dried leaves, sip slowly. Night falls fast this time of year. By the time you finish the tea, the windows are black. You go outside once more before bed. The stars are out. Sharp, distant. Too many to name. And beneath them, across the field, you see lights. Just for a moment. Like torches. Moving. Then they vanish. When you go back inside, you latch every window. The wind carries voices this morning. You don't hear them at first. Only the hush and hiss of the trees. The usual groan of frost giving way beneath your boots. But somewhere between the fire dying down and the kettle beginning to boil, the sound changes. Lifts. Words begin to form. Not loud, not clear, just present, carried by the breeze. Wrapped in the low whistle that moves along the cabin walls like a hand dragging a fingertip over glass. You freeze mid-motion, hand gripping your tin cup. You hold your breath. Children. You hear children. Laughter, almost soft and high, the kind that bounces between fence posts and field stones, usually just before supper or during a game played with sticks and no rules. The kind you haven't heard in years. Then it's gone. The silence returns, heavy and abrupt. You step outside without finishing your coffee. The snow has begun to melt in uneven patches. The field glistens with a sheen of ice, like the land is sweating. You pull your coat tighter and walk toward the edge of the brush where the trees begin to gather again, where the land curves down into the old creek bed that used to run all spring and dry up by mid-July. You don't plan to find anything, but you're not ready to be still. The first thing you see is a mitten. It's red, small, barely poking from beneath a patch of dead grass and frost. You kneel slowly and lift it free. Wool, torn at the thumb, frozen stiff. No trail, no other clothing. Just the mitten dropped like a breadcrumb in the wrong season. You pocket it without thinking and continue along the path, your boots loud in the silence. About 100 paces ahead, you find another. Not clothing this time. A drawing. Charcoal on rough cloth, nailed to a fallen log. It flutters in the wind like a flag. The image is crude. A figure with stick limbs, oversized hands, no eyes. Around it, smaller figures kneel. No faces. Just excess where mouth should be. You stare at it for a long time. You remember, suddenly, the woman in town who taught reading to children before the war. She lived in a narrow house with blue shutters and kept hard candy in a tin shaped like a goose. You passed it once years ago and heard singing from inside. 4 voices small and perfect, reciting the alphabet in a rhythm older than the war itself. She's gone now, moved east, or died, or simply stopped. You follow the trail farther into the trees. It twists, narrowing, closing in around you until the branches scratch at your coat like bony fingers. The sky above dims as the canopy tightens. Snow still lingers here, in patches that never see sun. You find a building before you expect it. A schoolhouse, or what's left of one, wood collapsed in on itself, the bell tower broken in two, door hanging from a single rusted hinge. The glassless windows gape like eyes. Around it, small stones mark the ground, rows of them, with names scratched into wooden slats. Some are too faded to read. Children. You stand in the doorway, afraid to cross the threshold. The interior is dark, but shapes form. A desk overturned, a stove rusted to its skeleton, a row of hooks still clinging to the far wall. One still holds a scarf. Blue. A sound. Behind you. You turn, heart pounding. Nothing. Just the woods. Then another sound. Not from behind this time. From inside. A creak. A footstep. You raise the rifle slowly, careful not to breathe too loudly. You step forward, boots soft on rotting boards. One more step. Another. A bird erupts from the rafters with a scream, its wings slicing past your ear. You don't flinch. Not this time. But your eyes fall on the far wall and what's scrawled there in charcoal. Do not forget us. Below it, smaller writing, barely visible. They come when we are forgotten. You leave. Not quickly. Not in a panic. Just deliberately. With weight in your boots and tension in your spine. The mitten in your pocket feels heavier now. Like it's remembering something you never knew. You return home by a longer path. You pass an old windmill, its blades broken, its shadow thin and reaching. The well beneath it has frozen over again. You remember lowering buckets into it as a boy, before the last drought turned it to mud. You never drink from it now. The sun is falling when you reach the cabin. You unsaddle your horse, brush the sweat from his sides, speak to him softly. He leans into your hand, seeking comfort you can barely give. Inside, you light the fire with fingers that tremble more than they should. You sit, you breathe. You take the mitten from your pocket and set it on the table next to the wooden horse, the coin, the broken ring from a skeleton by the trail. Each remark, a sign, a whisper. You open your notebook. The children never left. Not all of them. The schoolhouse stands. The names are still there. I saw their stones. I heard them. The land holds them like stories buried too shallow. You close the book. Night settles fast. You check the lock. Bolt the windows. But sleep doesn't come. Instead, you sit beside the fire, watching the shadows dance across the walls. And from outside, faintly, so faintly you almost doubt it, you hear it again. Laughter. High. Delicate. Children. Playing just beyond the edge of the trees. You don't step outside until the fire dies low. Not because you're warm, and not because there's comfort in staying inside. There isn't. But something about this day feels different, thin and taut. Like stretched rawhide, waiting to snap. You move slowly through the familiar motions, tying your boots, folding your coat collar, checking the rifle for weight and memory. The door groans as you pull it open. Cold air rushes in like it's been waiting. Outside, the snow is gone. What remains is a dull, silted crust, the color of bone and dust. The sky hangs heavy, low enough to touch if you reached. It presses down like breath on your shoulders. You listen. The wind is missing, replaced by silence that feels too precise. There's no rustle, no scrape, not even the sound of your own breath moving the air. You step forward anyway, closing the door behind you like drawing a curtain on an act you're not ready to end. Your horse waits near the trough. He doesn't nicker, doesn't stir, just watches. His eyes are wide, not panicked, just alert. More alert than you've seen him in weeks. You move to saddle him, but he pulls away. Not sharply, just a half step, as if he knows something and doesn't want to explain it. You pause, then reach out to touch his neck, whispering his name. He relaxes under your hand, but only slightly. You saddle him anyway. Your hands move slow, deliberate. You're not sure where you're going, only that you have to move. Something in the air demands it. You check your bag again, coffee bread, a small knife, the journal. You hesitate with the rifle, then sling it over your shoulder, just in case. You mount. The leather creaks, loud in the stillness. Then the two of you move out into a land that no longer looks entirely like the one you remember. You take the west path, the one that skirts the hills and runs along the edge of the dry wash. It's narrower than you recall. The trees feel closer, their trunks leaning in like eavesdropping neighbors. The trail itself twists more, dipping in places where it used to rise. Like the earth has rearranged itself subtly while you slept. You pass a boulder shaped like a kneeling man. You don't remember it being there. A red cloth flutters from a branch ahead. You slow the horse, dismount, approach it. It's not a flag. It's a scarf, child-sized, frayed, faded almost pink from the weather. You touch it. It's damp, as if it hasn't been here long. You look around. Nothing. No tracks. No sound. Just that same deep silence. You take the scarf and tie it around your wrist. You don't know why. Maybe as a signal. Maybe as a promise. You remount and ride on, the path narrowing still until you reach the place you haven't been since before the frost. The cabin appears just after the trail crests. It's not yours, but looks like it could be. Same wood, same size, but too perfect. No rot, no broken glass, no lean in the beams. Smoke rises from the chimney in a thin, steady line. You halt your horse, heart thudding. You listen for any sign of movement. Nothing. No footsteps. No clatter. You dismount and walk forward. The door is slightly ajar. You nudge it open with your boot. Inside, the air is warm. A fire burns. A pot simmers on the stove. But there's no one there. Everything is clean. The table is set with 2 plates. One chair is pulled out. On the bed rests a folded quilt you recognize instantly. Your grandmother made one like it. Red squares, blue diamonds, the stitching uneven in the corner where her hand shook. You step inside. The door swings shut behind you. The air doesn't shift. The fire doesn't flicker. But the silence grows deeper. You sit, not because you're told to, not because you want to. You just do. The chair groans under you, but nothing else moves. You look around. Every corner is familiar, but impossibly so. Like someone built this place from memory, yours or someone else's. On the table, a cup of coffee steams. You didn't see it poured. You didn't hear anyone pour it. You reach for it. The handle is warm. The smell is strong, exactly the way you brew it. Black, bitter, slightly burnt. You lift it, sip. It burns your tongue, and then something changes. The room darkens, not suddenly, but like a curtain being slowly drawn across the sun. Shadows move where there shouldn't be shadows. And in the corner, by the window, you see it, a shape. Not a person, a figure. Thin, tall, arms longer than they should be, hands open and still. No face, no voice, but it hums. A sound like wind moving through the ribs of a dead animal. You don't move. You can't. The shape doesn't either. You breathe. It does not. The fire burns lower. The light flickers. And the humming gets louder, not in your ears, but in your bones. You feel it in your spine, in your jaw, behind your eyes. A vibration, a knowing. It's not asking you anything. It's not threatening. It's just remembering. You close your eyes. When you open them again, the figure is gone. The room is empty. The fire is out. The cup is cold in your hand. You stand. You walk to the window. Outside, the world is darker than it should be for this hour. The snow is gone. The grass is black. The sky is the color of slate. But it's quiet again. Not like before. Not empty. Just still. Like everything is waiting. You leave the cabin behind and mount your horse without looking back. You ride slowly this time, not hurrying, not retreating. Just moving. The scarf on your wrist flutters in the wind. The rifle feels lighter. The road bends in ways it didn't before. You follow it anyway. Because now, you know something you didn't before. Not a secret, not a fact, a feeling that the land is alive, that the silence is watching, that the past is not behind you, but all around you, moving in the trees and under the stones and in the dreams you haven't had yet. You ride until the stars appear, then farther, until you no longer remember how long it's been since you left the cabin, or whether you ever truly left at all.